Hey guys, Pastor Josh here, coming at you with another second helping. It's basically just the stuff I couldn't fit on the plate for this past Sunday's message. We were doing the movie Ford versus Ferrari in our At the Movie series, and it's a great story about how these guys built a race car to compete in this 24-hour race called Le Mans. And the driver's character, which is played by Christian Bale, it's a true story about a guy named Ken Miles. And one of the scenes I didn't get to use this week in our sermon was what actually happened on the very beginning of that race. So the whole movie is building up to the Le Mans race, and the way they used to start these races back in the 60s is you had the racetrack down the center and the cars all parked on one side. The drivers had to stand on the opposite side of the racetrack, and when they waved the flag to go, the drivers would run across the course, jump in their cars, and peel their cars out to start the race. They don't do that anymore. Obviously, it's probably a safety issue, but back in the 60s, they did this. And in the movie, you can see a scene, and we'll put the clip, we'll link it to the clip down below. You can see where he jumps in the car and his door won't shut. Now, that's not a Hollywood thing. That actually happened to him. And he starts trying to drive down this race course. You got to understand, they're going 200 plus miles an hour. And in the first lap, he keeps trying to shut his door. He keeps reaching out and shutting the door, and it just won't close, it won't latch shut. And so he's got Ferrari and all these other race cars flying past him, and it's a scary start. And it when he finally gets back all the way around the track, he has to pull into the pit on his very first lap, and it sets him way behind. Now, I love this scene, and I didn't really get to go into it in our message because it speaks to this truth that a lot of us have experienced. Some of us have a really bad start to our life, to our race. God's called us all to run a race and to do it for His glory. But if you look at our lives, we usually have some bad starts. You might have had a bad start to today. You might have had a bad start to this year. Heck, you might have had a bad start to your life in general. There's a lot of stories throughout the Bible with people who started off bad. But here's the great thing about our God, is that a bad start doesn't mean that you're done, that your race is over, okay? So write that down. A bad start doesn't mean your race is over. And here's 3 ways I want you to understand this. A bad start doesn't mean you have to have a bad attitude. I read to you the verse yesterday from James chapter 1 and verses 2 and 3. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind, no matter how bad, if your door won't shut, or if you stubbed your toe, or if your first marriage fell apart, regardless of how big or how bad your circumstances are, no matter what comes your way, consider those bad circumstances, consider them an opportunity for great joy. You know, when your faith is tested, that's when your endurance has a chance to grow." What a great truth, that a bad start doesn't mean we have to have a bad attitude. But it also means this: we don't have to have an actually bad race. He has a bad start, but he ends up having the best time. He has a lap. He does a lap in there that's the greatest lap that they've ever had. He sets an all-new course record for how fast they can go around. And that's after he started with one of the slowest laps because his door won't close. So here's what I want you to know. Secondly, is that a bad start doesn't have to mean a bad race. Your life right now, if you're still breathing, if you're watching this, then God's got a plan for your life. And maybe you've had a rough couple years. Maybe everything that you look back on the past has been negative or rough. God's got something new for you. God's got something right now for you to do that will change the course of your race. You can still have the best lap ever coming up. And that reminds me of Lamentations chapter 3, verse number 23. It says, "Great is God's faithfulness. Great is His faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh every morning." That means even if you screwed up yesterday and the day before and the day before, God's got fresh mercy for you right now. That is a new lap waiting to take place. Your best day you've ever had might be today, because you understand that a bad start doesn't have to mean a bad race. And then lastly, not only does a bad start not mean that you have to have a bad attitude or a bad race, but it also doesn't mean that you have to have a bad finish. Some of you have been just going through life struggling. You've been getting beat up, but that doesn't mean you have to end your journey rough. You can actually have the story that Paul had. Paul started his life by hating Jesus and killing Christians. That was Paul's job. And at the end of Paul's life, he writes to his protege Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. He says, "I fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I've remained faithful." He goes, "I've finished the race. I may have started bad, but I finished strong. So if you want a second helping, if you want to know something didn't get to cram in this last week, it's simply this. That true of the story of Ford versus Ferrari, and true of our life, and true of stories in the Bible, whether it's Paul or Jacob or so many different people, you might have a rough start. You might have some bad things that have happened. Might have some poor choices that you made, but God is bigger than that. And he wants you to have the best lap ever starting today. So whatever you got to do, you go back to God and say, God, I trust you more than I blame and believe in all of the bad things that I've done. I trust you. And I believe that you can give me a great finish to this race. That's my prayer for you. Thank you for watching this. I love you guys. God bless. I hope you have a great one.